Hello everyone, my name is Theodoric Nowak, and it's my honor to speak to the supporters of Chalice for their Lenten event, Fast As You Can. I've been regularly fasting for many years now, but as I began to prepare for this short video, I wrestled with how to explain why I fast on a weekly basis, and why I recommend fasting to every Christian who's serious about growing in the spiritual life. Just as we all have different devotions and spiritual practices, I think our reasons for engaging in the discipline of fasting will really differ depending on one's personality, preferences, and spiritual maturity. Over the years, I've read numerous articles about fasting and heard many speakers address the topic, but most of the reasons they gave for fasting didn't really resonate with me. And there's a reason for that. Many years ago, I was given an excellent book of daily spiritual readings, which had divided advancement in the spiritual life into 3 different stages or ways. The first is described as the way of purification or purgation. The second as the way of imitation, and the final stage as the way of union, or the unitive way. One of the major lessons I took from that book is that we're all at very different stages in our spiritual journey of faith. And what we can give or take away from any spiritual practice is going to differ dramatically from one person to another. For me, I needed a beginner's level reason to fast. And sadly, I still do. Personally, I've never fasted and felt a mystical union with Jesus through my hunger. Fasting is not particularly pleasant, it's challenging, but I don't find it extraordinarily difficult. I've seen people suffer at the end of life and endure agonies I can't comprehend. Is the tiny portion of suffering I endure when fasting redemptive? Perhaps. And to the degree that it is, the Lord is welcome to use it and disperse it as He sees fit. But I'm not a mystic, and I don't think offering up my little fasting is going to do much good for others, though I pray it does. So why do I fast? Well, I fast because I'm very much in that first stage of spiritual growth, the purgative stage. I'm still just wrestling with sin and trying to purge it from my life. And I know that I need fasting to overcome sin. In Scripture, 2 passages immediately come to my mind which emphasize that fasting has a pivotal role to play in the battle against sin and evil. The first is in the book of Genesis. Adam and Eve are literally in the Garden of Eden, and every fruit and vegetable is theirs. At this point, they're literally without sin. But temptation is real. Even though they're physically in the presence of God, the evil one, the serpent, is lurking. The one thing that is asked of them is that they abstain, fast if you will, from eating the fruit of the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. If they could have kept this fast, original sin would never have entered the world, but they didn't, and so it did. The second scriptural passage I think of is a story found in Mark 9 and Matthew 17. An evil spirit has seized a young boy, and the disciples try to cast out the demon, but they cannot. The boy is then brought to Jesus, who tells the father that if he believed, all things would be possible. The father's response is one of my favorite passages in the entire Bible. Lord, I believe, help my unbelief. At these words, Jesus casts out the evil spirit from the boy. But the scripture doesn't end there. We're told that shortly thereafter, the disciples are speaking to Jesus privately and ask why they were unable to cast out the evil spirit. In most traditional translations, Jesus replies by saying that this kind of spirit can only be cast out by prayer and fasting. So fasting is clearly pivotal to overcoming the evil one and his sins, purging sin from our lives. But the question remains, why fasting? What is it about fasting that assists us in our spiritual battles? The answer is actually quite simple. It can be found in the sayings of the Desert Fathers. For those of you unfamiliar with the Desert Fathers, they were early Christian monks who lived as hermits and ascetics in Egypt during the 3rd and 4th centuries AD. Much of what we take for granted now as accepted theology and church teaching wasn't even yet written, so the Desert Fathers were pioneers in living a life of complete abandonment to God in pursuit of His will. As ascetics, their lives were ones of simplicity. As desert dwellers, their battles were primarily against their own base desires and the devil. As followers of the Word and the Way, prayer and fasting was the manner of their life. As more and more people came to follow Jesus, many people recognized the holiness of many of the Desert Fathers and would travel from far and wide to see them. When they arrived, they would say to the Desert Father, "Abba, give me a word." And many of the responses were recorded and compiled into a document we now know as the Sayings of the Desert Fathers. One saying I'd like to focus on comes from Abba Pitrian, a disciple of Abba Anthony, who we know as St. Anthony of the Desert. Abba Pitrian said, and I quote, "If anyone wants to drive out the demons, he must first subdue the passions, for he will banish the demon of the passion which he has mastered. For example, the devil accompanies anger, so if you control your anger, the devil of anger will be banished. And so it is with each of the passions." And that's the end of the quote. So drawing from Abba Pitrian, how does one subdue any passion? The answer is that which is found in the gospel and practiced by the lives of the Desert Fathers: prayer and fasting. And it might seem odd that fasting would help you to control your anger, sexual appetites, immoderate desire for alcohol, or whatever other improper passion you might struggle with. But it does. That's because overcoming any sin is actually very, very easy, provided that you're not tempted by that sin. So if you don't enjoy the taste of alcohol, you're not going to get drunk. And the devil knows that as well. So he doesn't present us with things that bore us. He presents us with things that entice us. To overcome the devil is to say no to things that bring us pleasure and control the urges and impulses for things that offer us temporary but fleeting satisfaction. The beauty of fasting is that we can practice self-control in the face of temptation without putting ourselves into a place of temptation to sin. Because we need food to survive, the desire for food is one of our strongest urges. But eating is in and of itself, in moderation, not a sin. So if you undertake a fast to practice resisting temptation and you fail, then you do so without sin. And that's a lot better than practicing your ability to resist sin by flying to Vegas or putting yourself in harm's way. And that's why I think everybody, regardless of where they are in their spiritual journey, should incorporate fasting in some form into their spiritual regimen. In an increasingly secular and hedonistic world, temptation surrounds us in a manner like it never has before. No matter how spiritually advanced you are, there is no escaping temptation in this world. Each of us, you and me both, will encounter moments when we need to stand face to face with temptation and overcome it. So this Lent, please consider taking up fasting so that when the evil one presents you with whatever shiny apple entices you most, you'll be able to say no to him and yes to the love of Jesus.